Hello, my name is Roisin and welcome back to my channel. So recently on my community tab and on Instagram, I asked you guys if you had any types of books that you were looking for at the moment, and I would try to provide them for you. So that's what this video is. I've got several requests here and I'm going to do my best to find a book that I think will fit what you are looking for. Some of these are vaguer than others, but I'm going to do my best. And let me know in the comments down below if you have already read these and I'll try and recommend a different one for you. The first request I have from Instagram said, I would like some ghosts, please. So, as you may know, I really enjoy a ghost story, but kind of not a traditional ghost story, not like a Victorian haunting, but a story with ghosts is something that I love. And I actually have a whole video recommending literary fiction with ghosts in, which I will leave in the cards above if you would like to check that out. One of my favourite books that I read last year that does involve ghosts is The Betrayed by Riene Akake Melvin, which is set in the Philippines and is about two sisters and one of the sisters' husbands who have just returned to the Philippines after the sister's father died, and the Marcos regime fell. So their father was against the Marcos regime, and now that it's fallen, they've gone back to the Philippines, and Arturo, the husband, is trying to get into politics. And we kind of follow them over the course of a summer of his campaigning, whilst his wife is pregnant and she sees ghosts, and so that's kind of the ghostly element of it. It's a really great atmospheric book that looks at modern Philippine history and the way that the history can haunt us, and the effects of our history on us, like recurring trauma, intergenerational trauma, and it uses ghosts as a metaphor for that. Similarly, Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper-Smith is much more ghosty. There's weirdness from the get-go in that book, and it is set over two time periods, set in the 1980s, about a girl and two brothers and their relationship, and that girl has gone missing. But we don't really know anything more than that at the beginning. And then also in the current day time period, there is a Vietnamese American woman who is teaching English in Vietnam, and weird stuff starts to happen around her apartment. It begins with something very strange, and then it kind of calms down, but the ghosts get more and more, and again it's about history haunting us and coming back, and about the way we cannot escape our pasts. I think ghosts are really good for metaphorical resonance, and I just really enjoy the kind of creepiness of them, and both of these books have that in spades. So another one from Instagram is, I would say, historical fiction that doesn't involve World War II, also not into romance either. So I read a fair amount of historical fiction, as you might know, and I don't really like World War II historical fiction. The English Patient is kind of the only exception for that. I do have two videos about my favourite historical fiction, if, again, you would like to check one of those out. But obviously I'm going to say Wolf Hall, because it's set in the Tudor period, so definitely not World War II, and there's no romance either. It's about Thomas Cromwell, who was Henry VIII's consigliere, basically, and the first book, Wolf Hall, tells the story of his childhood, but mostly his working with Cardinal Wolsey, whilst Henry is married to Catherine of Aragon and trying to get a divorce, and then his eventual marriage to Anne Boleyn. And we follow Thomas Cromwell, and it is written in the present tense, and you feel, although it is written in the third person, you're kind of right on Cromwell's shoulder watching as he does everything, and we slip into his mind and what he's thinking. It's another one with ghosts in, actually, and it's just one of the best written things that I've ever read. Absolutely wonderful, the way that it plays with language, the way that it builds an atmosphere and builds a setting, I think is so brilliant, and characters as well, the way that it builds characters, it's really, really wonderful. One that is more modern but still historical fiction would be The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. It's another one with a real sense of place, and it is about an American missionary and his wife and four daughters who go to Congo in the 1950s, and they are trying to convert the Congolese people to Christianity as he is a missionary, and we see their interactions with the family, and it goes over the time periods as Congo fights for independence and the way that the family gets caught up in that independence struggle. And it is just from the perspective of each of the four daughters, and it is just so wonderful, again, really immersive, really atmospheric. There's a lot of events that happen that feel so alive. I still remember the ants scene. There is a scene with ants that is just really incredible, and so it's not World War II, it is post-colonial, it is the end of the colonial period in Africa, so it's post-World War II, but it's just so wonderfully done, so brilliantly written. I love Barbara Kingsolver's style. So then Rebecca Joy asked on my community tab for sweeping historical fiction that covers a full century / long time period. So the Poisonwood Bible does cover a fairly long period of history, but one of my favourite books that does this is The Old Drift by Namwali Sapal, which starts in 1904 and ends in 2024. So we cover 120 years of Zambian history, from the real colonialist period of the early 20th century up through the fight for independence in the 60s and into the 80s and the AIDS crisis, and then off into the future. And it tells the story of three families, and so we have three men who meet in the Old Drift, which is a bar in Zambia in 1904, and something happens between the three of them, and then they disperse, one back to the UK, one back to Italy, and one still in Zambia, and we follow their descendants, the grandmothers, the mothers, and the children, over the course of Zambian history, and also the relationship with the UK in particular, and other forms of immigration to Zambia, whether it's Italian or Indian. Those are all woven in there as well. Zambian fight for independence again, and the communists in charge after independence in Zambia, the absurdity of it all, medical colonialism and neo-colonialism with the AIDS crisis and up into the future. Parts of it are narrated by a Greek chorus of mosquito. Malaria as a mosquito-borne disease is another big part of the book, and it's just so brilliant. It is funny, it is clever, all of the characters are so well done. There are moments of kind of magical realism. One of the grandmothers has hair that just grows out of all of her body, so she looks like Cousin It, and it's so visual and so wonderful and funny and sardonic and dark, and I really, really loved it. It was one of my favourite books that I read in 2021, and it does follow that big sweep of history, so definitely that one. Another one for historical fiction, this time literary historical fiction, preferably from Antiquity or the Middle Ages. So for this one, I'm going to recommend Cathedral by Ben Hopkins. This is wonderful. It is like if Pillars of the Earth were literary and well written, and it is about a cathedral in a German town, and it is about from the perspectives of all of the people in this German town. So we hop around in different perspectives all the time. We have a sheep farmer who is one of our main characters who comes to town and wants to be a stonemason, and so we see how he gets involved with stonemasonry, and also with his brother gets involved with lending money because they don't have enough money to for their sheep. To pay their taxes, they don't have enough money, so he gets involved with lending money with the Jewish community in the town, and so the Jewish community also becomes a big part of this, and we see the sheep family as they become merchants, and we also have a bishop and his relationship with Rome, and with Catholicism, and then we also have some lords and their land, and it's a full sweep of medieval Germanic history. I think it's the 12th and 13th centuries, and we see pogroms and the exclusion of Jewish people from the area, and it's so well written. It really wonderfully builds this time period, and I loved it so much. It did remind me in writing of Hilary Mantel. Obviously Wolf Hall isn't medieval, but it has a similar sort of just the word choice and the way that the atmosphere is built and the way the scenes and the setting is built. That kind of reminded me of Hilary Mantel, but this is a much like broader, bigger, wide cast of characters, so I think it's really great at bringing to life the town and the cathedral. It's over the course of the building of this cathedral that takes decades, and it's just so wonderfully done, and I really, really, really recommend it highly. Kai asked for a book that will make them cry. So I'm not a huge book crier, so I feel like if books make me cry, then there's a good chance they'll make people who are book criers cry, because it takes quite a lot for me to cry. There's only a few books that I have cried at in the past few years. One of them was Our Wives Under the Sea, which is about a woman who returns from a submarine mission changed, and her wife dealing with living with this woman who has come back changed and just wants to sit in the bath and drink salt water, and we go flash between the two different time periods, and it was just so beautifully written, and it's about loss and grief and depression. It made me properly well up at the end, just the imagery and the moment that I knew was coming, and it came, and it just really worked for me. Another one is Sing Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward. That definitely had me tearing up quite a lot. It is about Leonie and her son, Leonie and Jojo. They're travelling with Jojo's little sister up to his dad, who's just being released from prison, and they are going to get him, and we hear through this there's another book with ghosts in as well, actually, because Jojo can see the ghosts of what happened in the prison decades before when his grandfather was there. And the continuation of slavery as part of the prison system. Leonie is also a drug addict and not the best mother, and we hear about her relationship with her brother in her past, who is dead, and his ghost again haunts her when she is taking drugs. She sees him. There's so much sadness, so much intergenerational trauma, again, so much. It's such a dark book, but there was also so much warmth and love. Jojo and his little sister, I think, is what actually made me cry. And there's just so much in here, so much emotion. It is such a brilliantly written book. It really reads like prose poetry sometimes, particularly the moments when Leonie is less lucid because she's on drugs. Those moments are so poetically written, and it is really wonderful, so brilliant. And yeah, that really made me cry. And another one that made me cry is The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, which is set in Ireland in 1918 during the flu epidemic. And it's about a nurse over 3 days in a maternity ward where all of the women have the flu. And it is really as bloody and brutal as that sounds. There are some real descriptions of early 20th century birthing methods. And there is also of the flu, and there is also of the treatment of unmarried women and their children by the Catholic Church and the Irish state. It's a big part of this. One of the characters, Birdie, is a skivvy, and she is helping, but she doesn't know what she's doing at all as well. And there is also a character who is the doctor, who is overseeing things, who only comes in every so often, and her involvement with the Easter Rising as well is part of it. So there's a lot going on in a short book, but it made me cry. Again, it's one with love and hope in the heart of it, but also so much sadness and so much structural sadness, which I think is really what got me, the unfairness of it. Ludovic Tulia, I apologise if I've pronounced that incorrectly, said something heartwarming and optimistic but not too kitschy. For this, I would definitely recommend Still Life by Sarah Winman. It is about Ulysses, who is a soldier in the Second World War, and he meets Evelyn, who is an art expert who is trying to get Nazi art back to the right places, or art that Nazis have stolen back to the right places. And they meet, and she tells him to go to Florence and something magical will happen. And he goes to Florence, something does happen, but he goes back to East End and his pub, and it is this warm family of chosen family that is a big part of this book. There are all of these misfits and weirdos at this pub, him and his ex-wife, and all of their relationships to one another, their difficult relationships. And then one day Ulysses receives a letter to say that he has been left a flat in Florence, and he ends up back over there with various members of this chosen family, of this disjointed, strange family, and we just follow them over the course of their years post Second World War, first in the UK and then in Italy. There is the flood in Florence, and there is also Evelyn and her history and her relationship, her and Ulysses nearly bumping into each other so many times over the course of these few decades and missing. And it is so heartwarming, so lovely, and it doesn't go kitschy. I feel like it is really like honest to human behaviour. It doesn't shy away from darker parts of the human life, but it does so with love for all of the characters and with so much warmth, and the connections between the characters, I think, is where a lot of the warmth really lies. It also is wonderful, beautiful descriptions of Florence and of Italy in that time period. It's wonderfully sunny and warm. Another one that I think fits the bill is Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo, which is the story of a man who is from Antigua and has come to the UK with the Windrush generation, and he and his wife live together, but they don't love each other and they are quite horrible to one another. But this man, Barry, that's his name, Barrington, has finally decided that he's going to come out to his family because the other person who came with him from Antigua was his best friend and his lover, and who have been together for over the course of most of his life, for 50 or so years, and he's finally going to come out to his family. And Barry it's from his perspective, and he is a raconteur. He can tell a story very, very well. He is poetic and charming, but he's also not a good person in a lot of ways, and his relationship with his daughter and with his wife, and even with his lover, we can see his selfishness and his misogyny. They are all clear, but there is still so much affection and love for him through the narrative, and also for all the other characters. So much tenderness, I think, displayed between the characters and for the characters by the narrative. And I think that that's what allows it to feel so warm and lovely and heartwarming. And the way that Barrington is coming to terms with who he is and feeling, you can see how a lot of his persona is just bluster because of his fear of who he really is and how that will be received in the world he lives in. And so I think it is a wonderfully heartwarming book, even though they are not the most likable characters all the time, any of these characters. I felt like I loved them even though they were hard to like. And then Ebony Kane, whose channel you should check out. I will leave link to the cards above if you would like to check her out. She asked for something warm, comforting and hopeful as well. And so, as I said before, Still Life, I think is definitely that. Very warm and comforting for me anyway, I found it. So, and because it's so much about love and family relationships, I think that there is a lot of hope in it. Another one for something slightly different, I would say Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola, which is a collection of short stories all about love, taken from different myths. They are adaptations of various different myths from around the world. Ancient Greek myths, Yoruba myths, Arabic myths, so myths from various different places, retold, a lot of them modernised, although not all of them. Some of them are set more in a kind of mythic world, but some of them are set, like Eros and Psyche is set at a fashion magazine, for example, so there are updated versions. For me, I think that this collection didn't work great read all at once, but I think if you were looking for a little snippet of something warm and lovely, because it is all about love, Bolu Babalola's made no secret that she is a romantic, and that is told in the introduction, and there was also the story towards the end that is more personal to her, and I just think it's so wonderful and warm, and I think she does a great job of introducing characters and of creating the connection between these people in a short space of time. They are all quite similar to each other, I would say. There's quite a lot of similarity to them, which is why I think they don't work necessarily all together, but definitely to dip in and out of when you need something warm and lovely and hopeful. I think that her writing and her characters are wonderful, so I would recommend it for that. Alice and the Giant Bookshelf asked for a crime or thriller with dystopian or post-apocalyptic elements. Now, I don't read crime and I don't read dystopia, so I feel like I'm the wrong person to ask for this. I don't really like dystopia at all, but I have a couple of books that I think fit, and so maybe would be good recommendations for you. Neither of them were books that I absolutely loved, but as I said, I don't like dystopia and I don't really read crime, so they might work for you if that is what you're looking for. One is The Trees by Percival Everett, which was on the Booker shortlist this year, and this is definitely a crime book. It is about the murders of these people in a small southern town, these people who were involved in the lynching of Emmett Till turn up dead, or who are the descendants of people who were involved in that, turn up dead. And next to them is the body of a dead black man who resembles Emmett Till a lot. And so this is in a small town in Mississippi, and the MBI, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, get invited down, and it's two black men who work for that, who then start interrogating the small white town about these murders to find out what has happened. And it ends up going bigger than that, more global than that, and there are elements of weird, dark, like it goes weird, it goes bizarre, in kind of a post-apocalyptic way, I would say. So if you are into that, I think there is elements of dystopia in where it goes, and also kind of the dystopia of where we live now, the dystopia of a racist society, and also of a police force and their relationship to race, particularly in the American South where it is set. It's a satire and it's darkly comic and biting, and I thought that the beginning was so wonderful. The writing really sparkled. For me, it went in directions that I didn't enjoy, but I do think, and I think it didn't quite hold up. I think satire can be quite difficult to sustain, but I do think that if perhaps you are more into that crime, it has that kind of noir feeling, then I think you would enjoy it, particularly if you like the works of like Jordan Peele and Spike Lee, then I think you would enjoy this book. And then another one, which is a political thriller with a kind of techno-dystopian element to it, is Turing's Delirium by Edmundo Paz Soldan. Edmundo Paz Soldan is an Ecuadorian writer, so this is set in Ecuador, and it is about a breach of security at the kind of Ecuadorian equivalent of the CIA or MI6, and we have, from the perspective of various different characters, including like hackers and kind of political hacktivists are involved in it, and the secrets that have happened during the dictatorship in Ecuador being uncovered. So there is an element of kind of dystopian, but not dystopian because it did happen, but also it does have that technological, like hacking kind of science fiction side of it, and it's a slowly uncovered book about what people will do in extremis, or people will do because of what their job requires of them, and the ways that societies try to recover from a dictatorship, but this time in times kind of just shutting it down. And it is also about like surveillance and being watched, and so I think definitely has dystopian elements to it. So I think could be an interesting one if that's your sort of thing. Cece said, I've always loved Sarah Waters' Affinity and The Night Watch, a quiet book with a twist and atmosphere. And so for that, I would recommend Lean Full Stand by John McGregor. This isn't historical fiction like those two are, but it is a book where something happens that changes the book altogether, and it's definitely a quiet, still book as well. So we are in Antarctica with 3 men who are on an expedition trying to improve the mapping of the ice plate, and something happens and it changes what's going on, and then we end up back in the UK following a man recovering from a stroke. He's trying to recover his speech and he's working with aphasia, and so it's not a twist because I mean that is in the synopsis, so I don't think it's quite an uncovering, although there is a mystery as to what actually happened on the ice sheet, because someone is dead and we don't know why, and the man who could tell us has lost his speech. So there is that in it, but it is a very quiet book, very slow and very still, and one where language plays a really important part. And it's really beautifully and brilliantly written, so I would definitely recommend it for that reason. I'm not sure I have any others of that style, quiet and with a twist, but I think that would fulfill that. Rachel Newsden said, I enjoy Jane Austen, Shannon Hale's Austenland novels, romance, comedy, but also smart about humanity, characters who grow together over time, who actually like each other. So for this, I would recommend Vari McFarlane as a writer, just in general. Her work, she writes rom-coms, so things like Don't You Forget About Me and If I Never Met You are 2 of them that I enjoyed myself. I think what I like about hers is that there is romance involved. There is always characters who find to meet one another, and they are romance novels with a happily ever after, which is necessary for the genre, but they also have really great friend groups, which I think a lot of romance novels miss out on. These are clean romances. They are not these are clean romances. They're not smutty or spicy in any way. They are very clean romances, but they are feel more like rom-coms than a lot of romance novels. But they have, like I said, they have wonderful cast of characters, and each of them deals with a serious topic, whether that is racism in the workplace or sexual abuse at schools or various things like that. Never in a way that feels gratuitous or overdone, but in a way that feels very well handled. And they also have a lot of humour and comedy, and they're very, very British. So if you like Jane Austen, I guess that would work. Yeah, I think they're really lovely books. Very easy to read, but still smart and engaging, with intelligent, interesting characters who have families, who have friends, who have dysfunctional moments, and I think really well done. Angie R asked for historical fiction with a dash of fantasy and or magical realism, and I mean, that used to be my bread and butter. That used to be everything I talked about on this channel. And so that gives me an excuse to talk about a book that I love that I haven't talked about in a long time, which is The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gower. This is set in 18th century London about a woman who is a courtesan who is down on her luck after losing her sugar daddy, and a man who is a merchant on the up, who's the head of his ship came back with a mermaid, which is not really a mermaid, it is a monkey fused onto a fish, but he's going to show it as a curiosity. And the madam of a brothel, who is trying to both reclaim this courtesan and claim this curiosity to show to the world, and that's how the two end up meeting. And it is a big chunky novel set in the 18th century, very bawdy, very funny, but also it does have that magical realist element, because the head of our ship goes out looking for another mermaid and brings something back. It is another book that really builds the atmosphere of the time period, I think, really well. It feels very visceral and real. It deals with various different topics, because we follow the perspectives of many of the different women involved in the brothel, one of whom is mixed race, and her relationships with the relationships of the world with her based on her race, and also some of the servants. There is a black male servant as well who is involved with that part of the story. It's a very gritty, dirty, dark part of London, whilst at the same time being very floaty and sexy. So it's not like Bridgerton. I think it's kind of like Harlots in that way. I've not actually seen Harlots. This is just my assumption from the marketing of it, but it's very fun, has a frothy element to it, but also has something else going on underneath, some sort of dark, murky melancholy, and I really loved it. Kit said, I would love a recommendation for an interesting and well-written contemporary Latin American novel. So that's very specific, and I haven't read a huge amount of contemporary Latin American novels, although I did mention Turing's Delirium by Edmundo Paz Fuldan, which I think would work for that. Not a novel, but a collection of short stories is Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez, which are all set in Argentina and have magical, dark, kind of horror elements to them, particularly in relation to the dictatorship in Argentina and the scars that has left on the country, and also class and ghosts and darkness, and it's wonderful. There is a haunted house story in there that I really enjoyed, and a story of a ghost child on the streets of Buenos Aires as well, which I thought was wonderful, and just some really creepy dark things, but also atmospheric, and just very unsettling. Sorry if I'm speaking fast, I'm running out of battery. Springtime in a Broken Mirror by Mario Benedetti is a Uruguayan novel that I really loved, but it is from 1982, so it's not contemporary, it's 40 years old, but it is about someone returning to Uruguay again after the end of the dictatorship in Uruguay, and it is about a father-daughter relationship. I read it a while ago, so my memory of it is not that strong, but I do remember really enjoying it. It's a very slow-moving, still novel that is very ponderous, and it flashes between two time periods as far as I remember, so I do remember thinking it was really well written, but as I said, not exactly contemporary. Ellie Lit P asked for a book set in early 1900s New York. Now I don't think I've read a lot set in early 1900s New York. I think that Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton might be the 1890s, so it might be late 19th century New York, but that is a really wonderful classic if you haven't read it, about marriage and women's place in the world and betrayal, a woman who has to choose between two men, one of whom is suitable, one of whom is not, set in a society where everyone is watching you, and where your position in life is really important, and I just think it's wonderful. Very sad, such a sad book, but really lovely. And then like a bit of a strange one for this because it is magical, but The Philosopher's Flight by Tom Miller I think is really wonderful. It is about a early 20th century, kind of around the beginning of the First World War, about witches who go to a university to learn like the science of witchcraft, but mostly they're learning to fly, and most witches are women, but our main character is a man who is the son and brother of a very powerful witches, and he flies, which is very unheard of for a man, and most witches who are men don't do that kind of magic. It's like the very female kind of magic, and he wants to become part of the flying corps who are like helping to move people around the world and save people and things, and that's what he wants to do. And it's about him trying to get into this university, get into the flying corps, and then kind of hazing the shit out of him. And then also there is a men who want women to go back into the kitchens and don't believe that witches should exist, who are kind of being terrorists during the course of this. And it is really fun. I wasn't expecting them to love it as much as they did, but all of the characters are so well developed, so different from one another, and there's that camaraderie and the academic setting, which I really loved. And it does feel like it's in that time period, even though it is about witches, so I don't know if it's quite what you were looking for. Rachel Newston asked for a book with no death, which there are a lot of books with no death, but I was looking through all of my books and a lot of them do have death in, so it's really difficult because what kind of book do you want with no death? We could have the Vari McFarlane again. There are a few that do deal with death, but If I Never Met You is about a woman who is dealing with racism in the workplace and breaking up with her long-term boyfriend because he decides he doesn't want to be with her, and so she has a fake dating relationship with a man who works in the office who it needs to be seen as responsible and reliable, and she is seen as that, so if they are together then the people take him more seriously, so they end up in a fake dating relationship. But if you want something that does deal with serious topics but doesn't involve death, I would recommend Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju, which is in South Korea, and it follows Kim Ji-young, who is just a typical South Korean woman through the course of her life. We begin when she's had a breakdown, and then we flash back to her childhood and see the ways that she was raised and the insidious ways that misogyny had affected her life from childhood through school and into the workplace and motherhood as well. And it's a book that has footnotes to reference studies that talk about these things in South Korea, and so Kim Ji-young, it has her relevance to the world, and it has a good twist in it as well. I really think the ending just brought everything home. It was really wonderful, and there's no death. There is no death, but there are very dark topics, including like the thing in South Korea about putting cameras in women's bathrooms and things, which just sounds terrifying to me. Now, my camera is dying and on its last legs, so that is the last recommendation that I'm going to be able to do today. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found a recommendation. If you have any recommendations for any of these topics, please let me know in the comments. Let other people know in the comments down below. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and to subscribe. I put out new videos twice a week, so I will see you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!